Imagine standing on your own land, over 1,200 acres of it. Land you didn't inherit, land nobody gave you, land you built with your own hands, your own will, and a resilience so extraordinary that even now, more than a century later, it demands to be remembered. Now imagine that same land being taken from you, not by drought, not by debt, but by three men who rode up one evening and decided that a black man owning more land than they did was something they simply could not allow. This is not legend. This is not folklore. This is a true story. This is the story of Alex Petty, and it has never been told until now. When the Civil War ended in 1865, 4 million people walked out of bondage carrying almost nothing. No money, no land, no legal identity beyond their own names. The Reconstruction era promised much. 40 acres and a mule became a phrase so well known it entered legend. But for most black families in the American South, that promise was broken almost as soon as it was made. In Halifax and Pittsylvania counties in south central Virginia, the landscape was dominated by tobacco farming and the social architecture of the plantation era, an architecture that did not simply vanish with emancipation. White landowners retained control of the best acreage. Black families were pushed toward tenancy and sharecropping, arrangements that kept them working land they could never own and in debt they could never escape. Against that backdrop, a man named Alex Petty, son of a formerly enslaved man known as Isaac Ike Petty, did something almost unimaginable. He built an empire. What we know of Alex Petty comes to us the way so much Black history does, not from courthouse monuments or textbooks, but from family, from memory kept alive across generations by people who understood that to forget was to lose something irreplaceable. In a conversation on RootsSpeak Live, the history and ancestry program hosted by Sonya Womack Miranda on WKBY in Chatham, Virginia, Eugene Ricky Petty shared the history his family has carried for generations. A great-grandson of Alex Petty, Ricky has spent years tracing his roots. Much of the foundational research, he says, was done by his Aunt Esther, who painstakingly documented the family's land holdings and the story of how they were lost. Alex Petty's father, Isaac, known as Ike, was enslaved by a white landowner named John Petty in the Halifax County area. The family surname, like so many surnames carried by Black Americans, came from the man who once claimed ownership of Ike's body. But Ike was no passive figure in his own story. According to family history, when Union soldiers came through during the Civil War and seized a horse he had raised from a foal, his horse, his labor, his bond, Ike didn't simply accept it. He sued. He found a lawyer. He took his case all the way to Washington, D.C. He couldn't read or write, but he understood justice. He signed the settlement agreement with an X and received $100 in compensation. That is the bloodline Alex Petty came from. A man who looked at a system designed to crush him and found a crack in the wall. According to family history passed down through Aunt Esther's research and preserved by Ricky Petty, Alex Petty became a farmer. Not a tenant farmer, not a sharecropper, a landowner. He acquired 3 farms, one of 500 acres, one of 600, and one of 200. More than 1,300 acres of Virginia soil, accumulated by a man who had been born into a world that refused to acknowledge his humanity. He wasn't only a farmer. Family tradition holds that Alex Petty became the first mailman in Java, Virginia, a position of public trust and civic standing that spoke to the respect he had earned in his community. He was married 3 times, and the children he raised, regardless of bloodline, he simply called his own. Think about what it took. Post-Reconstruction Virginia was not merely indifferent to Black prosperity, it was actively hostile to it. This was the era of sundown towns, communities where Black residents faced violence if they hadn't returned home by dark. To own a single acre under those conditions was an act of defiance. To own over 1,000 was extraordinary. And yet, he did it. This is where the story becomes harder to tell. According to the oral history that has been passed down through the Petty family, one evening Alex was at one of his farms, finishing up at the barn, preparing to head home. 3 men came upon him. They asked what he was doing. He told them, finishing his work, going home. He never made it home on his own. The family account holds that Alex was killed right there on his own land. To make it appear an accident, his killers wrapped the reins of his horse around his neck and let the animal go. The horse, whose name family tradition tells us was Bob, walked the entire way home. When he arrived at the stable and stood still, it was Alex's wife, Lou Fanny Petty, who found him. That stretch of highway would come to bear the name Petty Stretch, a name that exists, according to family history, as a quiet and enduring marker of what happened there. What is not in dispute is the pattern. Across the American South in this period, Black landowners who accumulated too much, who became too prosperous, too visible, too unafraid, faced violence. The historical record is full of their names. Alex Petty's story, whether it can be fully documented or not, fits a pattern so well established it has a name: racial terror. With their main provider gone, the Petty family began to lose ground, literally. Without Alex's income and management, taxes went unpaid. The 500-acre farm was lost. Then the 600-acre farm. But the 200-acre farm? It is still in the family, more than a century later. Ricky Petty has traveled to 8 African countries as a videographer, walked the slave quarters at Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, and felt, as he describes it, a smell that has lingered for 400 years, one he believes was allowed to remain as a permanent witness to what was done. He traces a direct line from that history to his great-great-grandfather's story, a man born into bondage, a family that built something real, a legacy that was attacked but not erased. Because here's what the men who rode up to that barn that evening could not have understood. They could kill the man, they could seize the land, but they could not kill the story. We are taught a particular version of Black history in America, one defined almost entirely by suffering and constraint, slavery, segregation, exclusion. And those things were real. They must never be minimized. But they were never the whole story. There were men and women who, coming out of the most brutal system of forced labor in American history, looked at the wreckage left behind and chose to build. Who owned farms and ran post offices and raised children and sued the federal government and won. Who understood the legal system they were navigating even when no one had taught them to read. Alex Petty was one of them. His father Ike was one of them. Lou Fanny Petty, who received her husband's horse at the stable door and held her family together in the years that followed, was one of them. Their stories were not lost because they weren't worth telling. They were buried because powerful people understood exactly how dangerous it is for a community to know what it is truly capable of. 200 acres, still held. A name, still spoken. A horse named Bob, who walked home, who made sure someone would know. Alex Petty built an empire. They took most of it, but they could not take all of it. And they could not take this